All right, welcome everyone to the deep dive. Today we're diving into all the latest AI news. We've got a pretty wide range of sources today, all the usual suspects. Research labs, industry insiders, a bunch of news outlets, all those places that kind of drive the AI conversation.
Right, exactly.
And I think that our goal here is to kind of cut through the noise a little bit and give you kind of a clear picture of what's really important.
Yeah, because I think you're absolutely right. The thing that really stands out to me is just the sheer amount of activity in the AI space right now. It feels like there's some major new development almost every day,
Yeah.
and not just like incremental changes, but things that really have the potential to change how we think about AI and how we use it.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great point. And one of the areas where I think we're seeing that most clearly is with these new reasoning models that are coming out.
Right.
It seems like we're moving beyond AI that just recognizes patterns to AI that can actually think through problems in a more human-like way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's really the key difference with these reasoning models, right? It's not just about prediction anymore. It's about actually being able to solve problems step by step, like a human would. And one of the techniques that's really been driving this progress is something called chain of thought prompting.
Chain of thought prompting, yeah?
Yeah, where you basically get the AI to explain its reasoning process. And what's really interesting is that by doing that, you often see this big jump in accuracy,
Hmm.
especially on tasks that are really challenging. So it's kind of like the AI showing its work, which can be really helpful in understanding how it's arriving at its conclusions.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like, how do you eat an elephant, right?
Yeah.
One bite at a time.
Right. One bite at a time, yeah. And these models are kind of doing that. They're breaking down these complex problems into these smaller, more manageable steps. But I've also noticed that this increased capability seems to come at a cost.
Yeah, that's a really important point. These more sophisticated reasoning models, they tend to require more computational resources.
Sure.
So that means they can be more expensive to run, they can be slower, and that's led to this kind of search for more efficient solutions, like these hybrid models.
Hybrid models. So how do those work?
Yeah, so the idea behind a hybrid model is basically to combine the strength of different types of AI architecture.
Mm.
So you might have like a cheap worker model that can handle the kind of routine tasks. And then you have a slower, more powerful planner model that gets called in for the really tough problems.
So it's kind of like the planners, the strategist, and then the worker model is actually carrying out the individual steps.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, like a manager and a worker, right?
Yeah.
So the manager kind of sets the high level strategy, and then the worker actually goes and executes it.
I like that analogy. Yeah, that's
Mhm.
a good one. So what kind of impact are these reasoning models having in the real world right now? Like where are we actually seeing them being used?
Oh yeah, we're already seeing some really interesting applications. Things like market research, strategic planning, generating code that's more reliable, more complex, and even in areas like scientific discovery. In pharmaceuticals and climate science, basically anywhere where getting the right answer is really important, even if it takes a little bit longer.
So it's really about those high stakes decisions where accuracy is paramount.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, speaking of new developments, Google just came out with Gemini 2.5 Pro. What's the big deal with that?
Yeah, so Gemini is definitely making waves.
Yeah.
It's being touted as this really powerful reasoning model, and the benchmarks seem to back that up. It's doing really well in coding, logical reasoning, math problems. But one of the things that's really interesting about it is the pricing.
Hmm.
So it's $1.25 per million input tokens for shorter prompts.
Wow.
And that's actually pretty significant because it really kind of highlights, the cost that's associated with these advanced capabilities.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
know,
so that basically means that these top tier reasoning capabilities, they're not going to be universally accessible just yet, right?
Right, exactly. It's a premium product,
Yeah.
It's for those who really need that level of accuracy and who are willing to pay for it.
Got it. Okay. So what about OpenAI? I mean, they've been kind of the leader in the space for a while. What are they doing?
Yeah, so it seems like OpenAI is kind of shifting their strategy a little bit.
Mm,
There was some talk earlier about them maybe delaying GPT-5,
right.
but now they're saying that it's actually going to be released in the next few months, along with these other models like O3 and O4 Mini.
Mm,
So it seems like they're still very much committed to pushing the boundaries of reasoning in AI. And it's interesting that they're coming out with this kind of suite of models, right?
Yeah.
It suggests that they're thinking about different use cases, different price points.
Yeah. So even with Gemini coming out, they're still signaling that they're going to be a major player in this space.
Right.
Got it.
Right.
Okay. There was also some news about this framework called Fast2URL.
Oh, yes. Yeah, so FastTRO is this new framework that's specifically designed for training these R1-like reasoning models.
Mm-hmm.
And these are basically a type of model that's really focused on robust reasoning capabilities. And I think what's really important about frameworks like FastTRL is that they're making it easier and cheaper to train these models. And that's a big deal because it means that these capabilities are going to become more accessible to more people, more organizations.
All right. So it's not just about the models themselves. It's also about the tools that we use to build them.
Right, exactly.
Okay. Another area where we've seen a lot of progress lately is around AI agents, and specifically, there's this distinction between AI agents and agentic systems. So what exactly is the difference there?
Yeah, so that's a really important distinction to make. And I think a good way to think about it is like the difference between an assistant and a manager. So an AI agent, it's kind of like an assistant. It can execute specific tasks, based on the rules that it's given or the model that it's built on, but it's not really able to adapt or make decisions outside of those parameters. Whereas an agentic system, it's more like a manager, right? It can actually make dynamic decisions. It can learn from new information, and it can adapt its strategies based on changing circumstances.
Got it. So an agent follows instructions, and an agentic system can assess situations and act more independently.
Exactly.
Okay. Can you give me some examples of that? Like what would those look like in the real world?
Sure. So a good example of an AI agent would be something like an automated credit scoring system.
Mm-hmm.
It applies a set of rules to evaluate loan applications, but it doesn't really have the ability to consider factors outside of those rules or to adjust its approach based on new information.
Right.
Another example would be like a simple logistics routing algorithm. Could plan delivery routes based on static data, but it wouldn't be able to, dynamically reroute trucks in response to traffic or other disruptions.
Got it. So those are tasks that are very clearly defined and don't really require a lot of flexibility or adaptability.
Right.
So what would an agentic system look like?
So an agentic system, it would be something like an intelligent legal assistant.
Yeah.
It can analyze complex contracts, it can identify potential issues, and it can even suggest revised language based on recent legal precedents.
Wow.
Or you could think about like a really sophisticated smart fitness coach.
Right.
That can monitor your workout data, your sleep patterns, your recovery metrics.
Yeah.
And it can actually adjust your training plan and give you personalized recommendations based on all that information.
So it's really about that ability to understand context and to make decisions independently.
Exactly.
Okay. I saw that VS Code just came out with this agent mode in its Copilot Chat AI.
Yes.
How does that fit in?
Yeah, so that's a really great example of this trend towards agentic capabilities in software development.
Mm.
So basically, this new agent mode in Copilot, it allows Copilot to act more autonomously. So it can actually formulate a plan. It can execute coding tasks to fulfill your requests. It can even identify relevant files, implement code changes, suggest terminal commands. It can even iterate on solutions to resolve issues. But the key thing is that it's still keeping you in the loop so you can review and approve everything that it does.
Got it. So it's not just about suggesting lines of code anymore. It's actually about actively contributing to the development process.
Exactly.
Got it. Okay. And what about RabbitOS? I've been hearing a lot of buzz about that.
Yeah, so RabbitOS is definitely generating a lot of excitement. And it's really all about this idea of AI agents for everyone. So they just opened up an intern trial, which suggests that they're really actively developing and testing these more autonomous AI capabilities. And their goal is to make them accessible to a wider audience.
Right. So it really does seem like we're moving towards this future where AI can handle more complex, more unstructured tasks on our behalf.
Yeah.
Okay. And speaking of big players, Visa just announced this huge AI strategy. What's going on there?
Yeah. So Visa is making a major investment in AI. They've committed $3.3 billion.
Wow.
And And a big part of their strategy is around developing these next generation agentic systems for the financial sector. So they're really looking to leverage their vast data sets of transaction information to build AI that can not only detect fraud, but also actually transform how we interact with financial systems.
Yeah. I mean, that's a lot of money. That's a serious investment. And it really kind of underscores the strategic importance of these agentic systems.
Right.
Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit and talk about some of the specific applications of AI that are making news.
Yeah.
I saw that there's some big developments happening in healthcare.
Yeah, so there's this real push to accelerate the rollout of AI in cancer screening
Yeah.
within the NHS.
Hmm.
And this is, this is really important because AI has the potential to significantly improve both the speed and the accuracy of diagnoses.
Right.
And there seems to be a growing recognition that we need to get these tools into the hands of doctors more quickly.
Yeah, I mean that could have a huge impact on patient outcomes.
Absolutely.
So what about other industries? Like where else are we seeing AI being used in interesting ways?
Oh, we're seeing AI pop up in all sorts of places.
Yeah.
For example, IBM is using AI to enhance the fan experience at the Masters tournament.
Really?
Yeah. We're also seeing AI being used to improve non-destructive testing. So that's like inspecting materials and structures for defects. And Microsoft just launched these new AI agents for factory automation.
Mm.
So this is really a sign that AI is starting to transform manufacturing as well.
Right.
And even everyday digital tools are getting AI upgrades.
Mm.
So Kindle now has an AI recap feature to help readers catch up on books that they've been reading.
Mm-hmm.
And Vimeo has added AI-powered translation features to its streaming service, which is great for accessibility.
Yeah, I mean it's amazing how quickly AI is just becoming integrated into so many different aspects of our lives.
Right.
From healthcare to entertainment to everything in between.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's talk about the hardware, the infrastructure that powers all of this, because there's been some news about supply chain constraints, particularly in China.
Yeah, so there are reports that there's actually a shortage of NVIDIA H20 chips in China right now.
Right.
And that's because the demand for these specialized AI chips is just so high.
Yeah.
And I think it really highlights the challenges that we're facing in meeting that demand.
Right.
Especially given the current geopolitical climate.
Right. So even though there are these supply issues, there's still a lot of investment happening in AI hardware.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, even with the shortage, companies like ByteDance and Alibaba are reportedly placing huge orders for NVIDIA GPUs.
Wow.
And we're also seeing new AI infrastructure being built in other regions. So, for example, E2E Cloud just launched these NVIDIA H200 GPU clusters in India.
Hmm.
So the trend is definitely towards more AI compute capacity worldwide.
Okay, and it's not just about the chips themselves, right? I mean, the software ecosystem is also really important.
Yeah, absolutely. So NVIDIA just announced native Python support for CU Day, which is a big deal because Python is so widely used in AI development.
Yeah.
And we're also seeing new chips coming out that are specifically designed for AI.
Mm.
So MediaTek just released their Compania Ultra chip, and that's going to bring AI upgrades to Chromebooks.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's Ant Group. They're actually using domestic chips to train their AI models.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so they're trying to reduce costs and reduce their reliance on international technology.
So it sounds like there's kind of this dual focus on pushing the boundaries of AI hardware performance, but also making sure that it's more accessible and more diverse in terms of where it comes from.
Right.
Okay. So let's talk about the data, because, the data is really the fuel for all of these AI models.
Right.
And there's some interesting developments happening around how data is managed and potentially even owned.
Yeah, so this idea of individuals owning a piece of the AI models that are trained on their data is starting to gain some traction. And it's happening through these decentralized platforms. And I think this is really interesting because it addresses this growing concern about the use of personal data in AI.
Yeah. And it's an interesting question. If my data is being used to train these models, should I have some kind of ownership in them? Should I be compensated?
Right.
What about the more practical aspects of data management, like labeling data and organizing it? I mean, that's still a huge challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. And And there's a lot of effort going into streamlining those processes. So, for example, Datasaur just released this guide on using LLMs for automated data labeling,
Mm-hmm.
which could really help to make that process more efficient. We're also seeing more discussion around using data science techniques for demand forecasting, which is really important in volatile markets.
Yeah. So it's not just about the quantity of data, it's also about the quality and how effectively it can be used.
Right.
I also saw something about this model context protocol. What is that?
Yeah, so the Model Context Protocol, or MCP, is this open standard that's being developed by Anthropic.
Hmm.
And the goal is to create a standardized way for AI assistants to connect with external data sources and tools. So it's kind of a common language that would allow different AI assistants to seamlessly access and utilize information and functionality from all sorts of different places.
Got it. So it's about interoperability. It's about making these AI assistants more versatile and more integrated into our digital lives.
Exactly.
Okay. And of course we can't talk about AI without talking about ethics and specifically copyright. So what's the latest on that front?
Yeah, so the legal battles around AI and copyright are continuing to heat up.
Hmm.
So the copyright lawsuits that were filed by U.S. authors against OpenAI and Microsoft, those have now been consolidated in New York.
Hmm.
And newspaper publishers are joining in as well.
Oh, wow.
So I think this is really a sign of how serious these legal challenges are becoming.
Right.
And it's not just about text. We've also seen this controversy around ChatGPT generating those Studio Ghibli style images.
Right.
And that really sparked this whole debate about AI ethics and the potential for copyright infringement or artistic displacement. There was even a podcast that called OpenAI's Creation: An Insult to Life Itself.
Wow.
So, the emotions are running pretty high on this issue. And then there's this study that suggests that OpenAI may have trained GPT-4o on copyrighted books from O'Reilly without permission.
Hmm.
So that's really adding fuel to the fire.
Right. So a lot of creators are worried about their work being used to train these AI models without their consent or without fair compensation. And are there any other ethical concerns that are making headlines right now?
Yeah, so there are reports that ChatGPT can actually generate fake receipts that look really realistic.
Mm.
And that's obviously a concern because of the potential for fraud.
Right. So it's not just about creative content. It's also about the potential for these tools to be used for malicious purposes.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, let's move on to some of the specific AI models that have been released recently. Midjourney just came out with V7.
Yes.
What are the big changes there?
So Midjourney V7, they've introduced a draft mode that's supposed to make the iteration process faster.
Sure.
And they've also added voice prompting. They're claiming that this is the most intelligent, most visually appealing version of Midjourney yet. But the initial reviews have been a little bit mixed.
Oh, really? That's
Yeah.
interesting because usually, a new Midjourney release is kind of a big deal.
Yeah, it is. But it seems like maybe this one isn't quite as groundbreaking as some people were hoping for.
Got it. So we'll have to see how that plays out. What about efforts to address some of the known limitations of large language models, like the fact that they sometimes hallucinate or make up information?
Yeah, so UMI, which is an open source AI research lab, they just released this model called Helamy,
Hmm.
and it's specifically designed to detect hallucinations in LLM outputs.
Hmm.
So basically analyzes the text sentence by sentence. It assigns a score for factual accuracy, and it can even provide supporting citations.
That's cool.
Yeah, so it's a really useful tool for making sure that the information you're getting from an LLM is actually reliable.
Right, because one of the big challenges with LLMs is that they can be very convincing,
Yeah.
even when they're wrong.
Exactly.
So having a tool like that is really important.
Mhm.
I also saw that Anthropic just published this really interesting research paper. Oh, yes, the one called On the Biology of a Large Language Model.
Yeah. What's that all about?
Yeah, so in that paper, they use this technique called circuit tracing to kind of look inside their Claude model and see how it processes information. And what they found is that there's actually this kind of voting mechanism going on within the AI's neural network. So basically individual neurons are contributing to the final output.
Interesting.
And that's really fascinating because it gives us this new way of understanding how AI cognition works.
Yeah. It's kind of like the AI is having this internal debate and then coming to a conclusion based on the votes of its neurons.
Right, exactly.
Okay, and finally, I saw some news about this new multilingual speech recognition
Oh
model.
yeah, Dolphin.
Yeah.
So Dolphin is this new model that was developed by DataOcean AI and Tsinghua University.
Hmm.
And it's specifically optimized for Eastern languages and dialects.
Which is really important because it means that these speech recognition technologies are becoming more accessible to a wider range of people.
Right. Because I mean, for a long time, a lot of these technologies were really focused on English and maybe a few other major languages.
Yeah.
So it's great to see some progress being made and making them more inclusive.
Absolutely.
Okay. So we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about new models, new applications, new hardware, new ethical concerns. So
Yeah.
so what are some of the big picture trends that you're seeing in AI adoption and the future outlook?
Yeah, so Gartner just came out with this report, and they're saying that generative AI is now in what they call the trough of disillusionment.
Hmm.
So basically that means that the initial hype is starting to wear off a little bit,
Right.
and people are starting to realize that AI is not, this magic bullet that's going to solve all of our problems overnight. But even though that's happening, they're still predicting that spending on generative AI is going to increase significantly through 2028.
Wow.
So it's kind of this interesting mix of tempered expectations on the one hand, but still this underlying belief that AI is going to be transformative in the long run.
Yeah, it sounds like we're in this period of adjustment
Yeah.
where we're figuring out, what AI is really good at, what its limitations are, and how we can use it most effectively.
Exactly.
So what about some of the bolder predictions that are out there? Like what are people saying about the future of AI?
Well, Bill Gates just came out and said that he thinks AI is going to replace doctors and teachers within the next decade.
Wow.
So that's a pretty radical prediction.
Yeah.
And it really kind of highlights the potential for AI to disrupt some pretty major professions.
Right. I mean that would have huge implications for the labor market and for society in general.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what about governments? Like what are they doing to prepare for this AI future?
So we're seeing governments all over the world starting to take AI seriously.
Hmm.
So Tamil Nadu in India, they just announced that they're going to be teaching AI in schools starting in 2025.
Wow.
So that's the first state in India to do that.
Hmm.
And then on national level, India has announced this $240 million initiative to develop their own indigenous AI model by 2025.
Mm.
So it's clear that there's this global push to not only advance AI technologies, but also to prepare for the social and economic changes that AI is going to bring.
Right. So it's about both developing the technology and also thinking about how it's going to impact people and how we can manage that transition.
Great.
And I think that kind of leads to this fundamental question that everyone's asking is AI a bubble or is it a revolution?
Right.
Yeah.
And I think the answer is probably both.
Hmm.
There's definitely a lot of hype around AI right now, and there's a lot of money flowing into it.
Right.
So there's definitely a risk of a bubble.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the underlying technological advancements are very real.
Yeah.
And the potential for AI to transform industries and to solve some of the world's biggest problems is undeniable.
Right. So it's not just hype. There's real substance there.
Exactly.
Okay. And one last thing I wanted to touch on is the fact that it's not just tech companies that are embracing AI.
Right.
We're seeing more and more traditional businesses starting to adopt AI as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for example, OCBC, they're a bank, and they're actually being held up as a pioneer in generative AI. So they're using AI across their operations. And I think that's a really important signal because it shows that AI adoption is no longer just confined to the tech sector.
Right. So established businesses are starting to see the value of AI and they're starting to figure out how to integrate it into their existing workflows.
Exactly.
Okay. So as we wrap up here, I just want to kind of recap some of the key takeaways that we've talked about today. So first of all, we've seen this continuous and rapid progress in AI models, especially in the area of reasoning. Second, we've seen the rise of AI agents and agentic systems that are becoming more capable and more autonomous. Third, we've seen the development of new AI hardware and infrastructure that's necessary to support all of this. And finally, we've seen this ongoing debate about the ethical and social implications of AI, particularly around issues like copyright and data privacy. So it's a really dynamic and rapidly evolving landscape. And for you, the listener, I think the key question is how are these developments going to impact your work, your access to information, your daily life in the near future? These are things that we all need to be thinking about as we navigate this AI-driven transformation. So thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the latest AI news, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.